Happy Sabbath, everybody. It is good to be back with you all. Let's open with a word of prayer. Dear God, thank you that we as a group can meet again to share ideas, to learn more about end-time events, but more importantly, how those end-time events are meant to teach us and how you've pre-warned us through history about how we can prepare, what we should be doing while living through certain histories, and what to look forward to. I pray that your Holy Spirit, the Holy Spirit, may be with us as we learn together, as you guide our steps, that we can move carefully and be less prone to mistakes. I praise you and thank you always for the opportunities you give us and all the blessings that you've set aside for us in this life. I praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. So it's been, let's just say hypothetically, about 7 months since we last met. And from what I gather, you've already had one teacher come round, a local, share their thoughts about explaining the Sunday law. I had a chance to catch up on some of the things that Aryan went through last week. And so I hope to not go over the same things, but at least consolidate some ideas. Where this study will be different from last year is that I hope to go through what we go through together a bit more slowly, a bit more systematic, and a bit more interactive. So it's meant to be a class, in my mind, not a lecture. And so please, as we go through, please interact. Please stop me if any of the points don't make sense, because ultimately it's for all of our benefit. It serves no purpose just getting information out there if nobody understands what is going on, especially myself. So I've been asked what the purpose of this initiative is. Maybe Aryan explained, but we each have different perspectives of what the benefit is that we can take out of all of this. And I guess one of the key things for me is, okay, we are roughly a year, 2 years, a year and a half past what we've described as the Sunday law. So why are we still going on about it after all this time? There's things that are moving, happening in the world around us, so why don't we focus on them? But one of the important points that Arya mentioned last week was how getting your bearing correct when you start a journey is important, because it shapes the rest of your journey going forward. And there was a really nice analogy that he made about how small differences at the beginning can lead to very big outcomes or differences at the end. And so hence why it's so important for us to get it right, get the start of our journey right. And this journey being about our progress, our march towards the second advent. So if I were to ask, we have this thing, this concept, this doctrine, waymark, as we call it, that we've labeled the Sunday law. So this waymark called the Sunday law waymark. And if I were to ask you all, where do we get that idea from? So I'm not talking about from Ellen White, where she says there's going to be a Sunday law, but biblically, fundamentally, why do we even go on about this particular point in time? Why is it important? Where do we get it from? Biblically, at least. Because we know there's no verse that says a Sunday law, but we have certain passages that describe something that's going to happen in the world. on this march towards the second advent? Where do we get this idea of a Sunday law? I just use those words because it's what we're familiar with.
Mm-hmm. So you're asking for a Bible verse. Where do we find this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Revelation 14.
Mark of the beast.
Okay. So
like Revelation 13.
Okay, so we've got Revelation 13, Revelation 14. So I'll start with you, Mark. I think you said Revelation 14. What idea do you get from that? What is it about Revelation 14 that gives you an indication that something will happen in the lead up to the second advent?
I think the third angel's message that for some that develops somehow in really dividing in two groups. That there are people that are following the truth, and there are people that are misled by the beast, by worshiping it.
Yeah. So there's a message. That chapter is about 3 specific messages. And we'll say there's a group that's raised up to warn everyone in the world about a specific beast. Is that fair to say? So it warns you about there's a beast that's going to come, and this beast is going to behave in a certain way, and you need to be prepared for when that beast comes.
Yeah, I think the message is more that there's coming an end and that there's a harvest planned.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a warning, be careful for what the beast is doing to not get you harvested for God's crops.
Okay. So the second advent is coming, but to get prepared for that second advent, a beast is going to be there to try and turn you away from what God wants you to do. So at some point in time, there's going to be this beast that's going to do some things, and you need to be prepared because there's harvest that's coming, and you need to be prepared for that harvest.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's Revelation 14, and it's the target demographic, or the theme of that story is God's people. Okay. And then Walter, you said Revelation 13. What's that about?
It is the beast. Okay. That we already mentioned. It's the second beast, the beast from the earth. That forces people to have this mark.
Okay. Sea beast and earth beast. And it tells a bit of history about one of those beasts, and then it goes on to tell a bit of history about a second beast. And that sets the stage for introducing what Mark described about the message that God's people need to give as a warning about the second beast before you get to harvest. So conceptually, we can start picturing that there's going to come a point in time where these two elements, this beast is going to have a message, and you as God's people need to have a message to counteract the message from this beast. And we say that that's going to take place at this point in time. Things are going to reach not their climax, but going to reach a turning point. Okay, so where else do we get this concept of... So we've spoken about Revelation. There's a twin book that we can go to.
Yeah, we can see it, of course, in Daniel.
Okay.
Image setup.
Fundamentally, because that image setup is a past story. So that's Nebuchadnezzar's story, etc.
So Daniel 11.
Okay. Daniel 11, verse 41.
Mm-hmm.
So this Revelation 13, verse Revelation 13 and 14, they're all about a message from one of these two kingdoms to say, join my kingdom, essentially. And then Daniel 11, verse 40, verse what? Sorry, Lizanne?
Say it again.
Daniel 11, verse?
41.
Okay. And what's the story, verse 41, if you take me from verse 40?
So you see the king of the north entering into the glorious land.
So we start off with the king of the north, this entity.
Mhm.
Is going to enter the glorious land. How do you know that's related to the Sunday law?
That's a good question. uh, we know that, I think, in comparing Daniel and Revelation together, taking them together and seeing who's the king of the north and who's the glorious land, or what is the glorious land.
Okay. So this story in Daniel 11, it finishes, or typically we would say, it runs to Daniel 12:1, which is the close of probation, right? And then you went to verse 41. If we step back to verse 40, we can tell a story about how that's the time of the end. So in between all that, there's this event that you've described as Daniel 11, verse 41. And you said that we can use line upon line, I think, with Revelation to liken this to the same period that we're talking about over here. How? You don't need to go through the exact steps, but if you take what we've just discussed over here about this message, the story about beasts and etc., how does that fit into what you've said about Daniel 11, verse 41?
Well, I think that when we can understand at Revelation 13, we can see that there are two beasts of the sea and of the earth, and how we can see that out of the earth is the USA, and then we already know, and if we then compare that with Daniel and see what we see that the glorious land is, then we compare actually those two things.
Okay.
Spiritual.
So yeah. So I'm just writing what you said in my words. So in Revelation, we get this story about an earth beast, and we can go through different steps to recognize that that's the USA. And then when we read through Daniel 11, we have this. So before we dropped out, we were going through Lizanne's explanation, contribution about how you connect the story in Revelation 13 and 14 to Daniel 11, verse 41. And she described how you can understand Revelation 13 and the story about the second beast, and make application there. Once you've got that, you understand what's happening. And when you go to Daniel 11, the chapter, and you go sequentially, there's this story about the king of the north going on various conquests, and that's literal Rome, etc. But as you go through history and you get to a point where literal Rome stops being a subject of Bible prophecy, you can switch that and it becomes spiritual Rome. This is all old stuff, but we end up looking at verse 40 to 41 in spiritual sense. And so that king of the north becomes spiritual Rome. So we have these two places, Daniel 11, verse 41, and Revelation 13, we've got 14, and there's others, I'm sure, that talks about something that's going to happen where God's people and Satan's kingdom are going to come into confrontation. And for each of these parties to do that, they have to go through various steps to get them to the place where they can confront each other, where they're not immature anymore, but they've reached a point in their development as part of two separate kingdoms where they can now go head to head in the story about the great controversy. Does that checks out with everyone? It's straightforward? Yeah?
Mhm.
Okay. But now we want to know what these words mean. So the specific wording, there's very specific wording in Daniel 11 verse 41 at least. It says here, the king of the north is going to enter into the glorious land. But I don't know what that means. I don't know what entering into the glorious land means. So what do I do if I want to know what that means? So in the future, if you put yourself pre-Sunday law, you read about enter into the glorious land. That this thing is going to happen in the future. What steps do I go through to try and figure out what that means?
In the past, you would use William Miller's rules, I think, to understand, well, first the literal story, and then search the Bible for further explanations of the phrase enter into, like do a study of what does that mean, and the same with the glorious land.
So we know that this is going to happen in the future. So we're standing here and we're looking here to say, at some point in the future, King of the North is going to enter into the glorious land. So that's unseen events. It hasn't happened yet. But what we can do, as Emily has described, is we need to find something literal that has happened, where we can understand this phrase. So if we were to go in the past, what story would you go to try and understand that? This is the future, and we're looking to the past. And Emilise, you said you look for something similar to this concept because it hasn't happened yet. So you're looking for something similar in the past. Did I understand you correctly?
Yes, I what I meant specifically was you would do a word study, like what does it mean to enter into? Like look
Yeah.
at various Bible studies or not studies, stories. For that phrase, try to line them up. Maybe do a kind of line upon line to get the full understanding of what does it mean in a biblical sense to enter into. So that's what I meant with going.
Okay.
But of
So
course, also understand the literal story, like the dynamics there before doing that, which we didn't do maybe all the time.
So a thing about proof texting is you can look for phrases. So you can look for the word. If you want to understand what glorious land is, you can very much look for the exact wording of glorious land. You can look for the symbol. If you want to understand what chariots is, you can go through the Bible and look for the word chariots and understand it. But it works the exact same way with concepts. So King of the North enters into the glorious land. You may not find that exact wording, but you can look for the concept of that happening, of the King of the North going into the glorious land. Is that fair to say, Emilise, that you can also do that?
Yeah, I don't have a specific example in mind, but
Would you think about Rome entering into Israel?
Okay, yeah, you could go to a story about Rome going into Israel. Where would you go to do that if you were to think?
11.
14, 15, 16.
Was it? Yeah, about 16.
16.
I think. Yeah. Oh, and he shall stand in the glorious land. Yeah, 16. I was looking for that phrase.
Okay, so we can look for what happened literally in that history, where Rome, the king of the north, stands in the glorious land. And Alderteri's recently done some studies about what's going on in that exact history, where Pompey goes into the glorious land to do specific stuff. So that's one option. So we rewind time. Is there any others before I give mine that you can think of? What other story do you have of a king of the north going into the glorious land?
Babylon?
Nebuchadnezzar.
Okay. Where's that?
Daniel 1.
Yeah.
Daniel
Kings.
1.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got Daniel 1, verse 1. And in that story, Nebuchadnezzar goes into the glorious land. And what does Nebuchadnezzar do in the glorious land when he does that?
Taking all the people out.
In the verses, what does he do? So,
He besieged it.
okay, so there's a siege. And then? So sieges, he's not in the glorious land yet.
Brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God.
So he takes vessels
And princes from Israel.
out of Israel.
Yeah.
And puts them in his temple. Why do you think he did that? What were these vessels? Because he takes them into the house of his God. So they're not just shiny cups and etc. They're very specific. Why does he do that? Why does he go through that effort?
The symbol that he conquers the God of Israel.
Okay, so there's some religious warfare that's going on, yeah. So when these nations go around fighting other nations, it's not just political of I want your land and I want this. There's this recognition that everyone is pretty religious. And you, Israel, have made a big deal about your God protecting you, about your defenses from this God. So if you're worshipping this God, I want you to do what? Because he's taken their vessels, and what's he done to their temple, to Israel's temple?
Destroyed it.
So that happens in the future. He hasn't destroyed it yet at this point.
Mhm.
He's taken their vessels, put them in the house of his God, and just going along the lines of what Mark pointed out. Why has he done that? So there's physical warfare going on as well as?
Spiritual warfare. It's religious.
So there's a spiritual war going on, and that spiritual war can't be fought with swords and arrows and etc. It's ideas. Is that fair? It's an ideological warfare between Babylon and Israel. That's why this back and forth with their gods becomes important, because he's saying ideologically, you've given your worship to your God, but now you're under my control. You're under my dominion. And so you need to shift the focus of your worship to who? To my God. That's why when it was Babylon and Assyria attacking the home of their gods was so important, or any nation, it's because worship is central to everything that's happening in Mesopotamia. So we look at this story in Daniel 1 verse 1, and we can identify that there's something ideological going on there. If we go through Daniel 11 verse 16, we know we can find a similar dynamic, that it's more than just physical conquering. there's an ideological conquering that has to take place, because a big part of their system of government is worship-based. It's ideological. Are we on the same page?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if we know that the first thing that Nebuchadnezzar has to do when he marches into the glorious land in Israel is take control of their ideology. That's how you rule people. If you just put them in prisons, there's going to be revolts. There's going to be demonstrations and etc. So there has to be an ideological takeover first, and then he can do everything that he does with Israel. So we take that idea that we've seen in literal history and we bring it to what we're looking for in the future. So now we go to Daniel 11 verse 41, and entering into the glorious land, we can get some indication of what that means. What does that mean if we're looking at the past?
Ideological warfare.
So this idea of the king of the north entering into the glorious land in verse 41 has to be tied to ideology. Do you see how we've shown that?
Mm-hmm.
Can you quickly repeat that, Curtis, the connection?
Sure. So we said in Daniel 11 verse 41, we've got this phrase, enter into the glorious land. And we don't know what that means because it's in the future. It hasn't happened yet. So to understand it literally, we can't, because it's not a literal event that has happened. But what we can do is look for a literal story in the past where it has happened and see the dynamics of what went on there. So we look for a time when the king of the north goes into the glorious land and see why he's doing that, what he does. So the story that I took us to, or at least Lizanne and Mark, was Daniel 1 verse 1, Nebuchadnezzar going into Israel. We go to that story, Daniel 1 verse 1 and 2, and we see that Nebuchadnezzar, after sieging Judah, takes their king, but an important step in all of that was taking their worship items and putting them in his temple so he can take away their center of ideological worship, essentially. Yes, Emily's?
Mm-hmm.
So that's in the past, and like you were describing, we can use that past story to tell us about this future story. So if we have ideology here, we can take it into here and see that the king of the north entering into the glorious land is ideological there.
But if I can ask a follow-up question.
Yeah, go on.
Couldn't someone say that we are cherry picking in that we are taking this one part of the story about the worship items and making it all about the worship items? There were other things happening in that story as well.
So at least if we read the verses, if we list out the things that's happening in Daniel 11 Daniel 1 verse 1, let's just go there. 1 verse 1. So it says at this point in time, how do I make this bigger? Okay, I'm not too sure if you can see that. But it says Nebuchadnezzar besieges Judah. That's verse 1. So he hasn't entered into the glorious land yet. And verse 2, he takes the king. So there's something about, we can list all these items. Takes the king and the vessels of the house of God. And carries them into his temple and brought the vessels into the... So we've got two things that are pointed out in those verses at least. And then if you read down, you can for sure read other things. Yeah.
Yeah, take children.
So it's not that we are limited to these two. It's just what point you want to make about what's happening in the end. So we can definitely make application about taking the king, which we'll do. But we want to understand this as well. So we can understand that. So this is tied to ideology. And this is tied to rulership. At least in those two verses, those are the two things that we get out from it. And so we go back and we say king and ideology, and we bring them to the future, and we have king and ideology. So I'm just going with what the story has told me. And then if I read down and I find more things, I'd list down those things as well, and then bring them to the future that I'm trying to understand. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. So the reason why I've gone through this to try and demonstrate that what's happening here, at least in me making this point, that there's something ideological tied to this waymark, is because of one of the questions that came up. So I'll read the question, and then we'll see how what we've described fits into the question. So the question is, what is the speaking of the dragon in reference to Revelation 13, verse 11? Ellen White writes that it's actions from the legislative and the judicial branch, but it's not anymore today. So what is the speaking now? And is the speaking at the waymark? If yet, what was it at July 18, 2024? So let's break down the question into parts. The main question is, what is the speaking of the dragon? Ellen White has a perspective which is its law from two specific branches of government. And then we say today, we've gone through some steps to say that the Sunday law is not a law. We're all comfortable with that, or are we? Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So if the Sunday law is not a law, then what is the speaking? And the question has gone through steps to point out that this waymark is July 18, and we've expected a speaking here, because Ellen White will frame it that way, that the time when this dragon speaks, it's the Sunday law. And so, yeah, how do we understand that today? So before I share my thoughts, who asked the question, first of all?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we came to these questions together.
Yeah.
So I
Okay,
can't remember
that's fair.
exactly.
Okay, that's fine. So we've gone through this description of Daniel 11, verse 41. And we've understood that the King of the North entering into the glorious land, at least there's a big component of it is ideological. There's an ideological warfare going on there. That's why the King of the North, or one of the reasons why the King of the North enters into the glorious land, what it means. Now we're going to Revelation 13, verse 11. Again, what steps would you go through? I'm sure you've had discussion about what that could mean. What steps would you go to try and understand that? methodically.
You would go to another story where you see this.
Okay.
A literal story.
Yeah. So, dragon speaking. When it says in that verse, I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb and spake as a dragon. Where are we in history at the start of this verse?
The 2 horns like a lamb. Then
Yeah, this beast coming up out of the earth. Where are we in history?
1798.
We're in 1798, and we read about a lamb. That's a beast. And so this beast, that's a lamb, before I draw it, is it in 1798 that it's a lamb and it stops there? Where does that beast stop being a lamb?
As soon as the 7th kingdom takes over.
So we'll say this entire period, it's a lamb.
Yep.
It looks like a lamb. And it is a lamb. And so if it looks like a lamb and it is a lamb, it behaves like a lamb. And this is describing a period of time in where that takes place, from its rise all the way through until it stops looking like a lamb, behaving like a lamb, and being a lamb. So we have that part A. And then it says, speaks like a dragon. Why would John be told those specific words of speaking like a dragon? He's been led through a history that describes beasts. In chapter 12, he's led through a history that describes dragons. So, as I think Lizanne pointed out, where would we go to understand now you've been told this dragon speaks? Where can we go to? I've given a clue in chapter 12 or 13 to try and understand this speaking like a dragon. It's in Revelation 12.
12, yes. Is it last verses? Persecution and war that the dragon started.
Which verse specifically? Okay,
Oh, I'm looking, sorry.
No, that's fine.
Go on.
So we know that speaking is to do with your mouth. I've given you a clue.
Water is a flood.
What verse is that, Aryan?
15.
Okay, and what's that telling us?
It says
That
that
this dragon,
this dragon casts out water out of his mouth after the woman.
so we have a mouth, and there's water that comes out as a flood. Yeah? Ellen White will tell us, if you want to understand this second beast, you should understand the characteristics of your first beast. Where is this taking place in history, Aryan? This dragon in chapter 12, the serpent casting out water out of its mouth. What history is that describing?
1260.
So from 538 to 1798, you have this flood. And the key words in there are out of his mouth. At least for me, I'll share because we're running out of time. When I think of that, I think of something to do with communication. So in symbology, mouth is really used neutrally. It's used in connection to output of some information, whether it's speech, propaganda, deception, blasphemy, and etc. There's something ideological that's going on there with this dragon opening its mouth and water coming out as a flood. What would water be if you were to trace it through the Bible? What do you understand water to be?
Teachings.
Okay.
But I've got
rain,
a short question. Is the flood, is that not at the end of the 1260? The 1260, is that not the period that it is in the wilderness?
So this, in the verses itself, now we're going to have to backtrack a bit. So starting from verse 7, there's war in heaven. Michael and the angels fight against the dragon. The dragon gets kicked out of heaven and is now on earth. And they overcome this dragon by the blood of the Lamb, and they rejoice, and etc. And verse 13, when the dragon saw that he was cast out unto the earth, he persecutes the woman. Where are we there, Mark?
This
With that persecution of the woman. Yeah, so we're in 4 BC. Verse 14, and the woman is given 2 wings that she can go into the wilderness, and she's nourished there for 1260 years. So that's your 1260. And verse 15 says, this dragon now is going to cast out water out of his mouth after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. What's that dragon doing?
In first sight, it would be very kind because someone in the wilderness needs water. But I think...
So this dragon's at war with the woman.
The dragon is following her, yeah. And are trying to kill.
To deceive, just in verse 7.
In verse what, sorry?
Verse 7. That's why I was doubting when you were asking the question that Satan was cast down, which deceived the whole world. That was kind of...
In chapter 12.
12.
I'm lost. 12:7.
Sorry, 9. Sorry, 12:9.
Okay. So the dragon is trying to deceive. So there's something about deception going on. That's the objective of the dragon. It's not necessarily to kill everyone, but to deceive them.
Yeah. That's why I was just doubting when you asked which verse. I was going with...
No, I like that verse as well. Yeah, I like that verse as well. So we've got something about deception that the dragon's doing. And then now to Mark's point, we're in verse 15.
Yeah.
And we want to try and figure out, is that at the beginning or is that at the end? So if we were to go straight to the end of the 1260,
because
the woman is safe here. Yeah, is that fair to say?
Yeah.
That's verse 16.
Okay. Yeah.
16 is 1798.
So if the dragon is not damaging the woman in this time period, can't hurt it because the woman's protected, where is it doing bad things to the woman? Where is it trying to deceive the woman?
Yeah, ideologically.
Where? Sorry, as in the time period.
Right. Yeah, at the time that she's in the wilderness.
When she can. when the dragon can deceive the woman, where it has no protection. So at this point, does that make sense?
Did you point at something at this point?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Can you see? My
Your
screen
I
is
think your screen is frozen.
frozen. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there. There.
Okay, wait. I'm gonna need to stop sharing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, Mark, you asked, is this flood that's taking place, is it at the end or is it at the beginning? So if you're the dragon and you know that you can't harm the woman here, or you don't know that, but we know that the dragon can't harm the woman here
At the end.
when it's safe, when it's being given protection.
Mm-hmm.
This story about the dragon trying to deceive the woman either has to be before or after its safety period.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but you meant at the end of the 1260.
Yeah. In my mind, I have
It was
this
1797.
A specific time period within the 1260, you said.
Yeah,
So-
at the end of the period, as the first people are going to over the ocean, crossing the ocean, and going to find safety in New England.
Contra-Reformation, then you mean? Or
No, the first,
How would you go about proving that it's specifically these last 2 years?
it just has to do with the crooked Adventist understanding that maybe I have still in my mind, that the pouring out of the flood by the serpent is just the crossing of the ocean for the people to get safety in New England, in America.
But then we have a wrong understanding.
Yeah.
So this dragon is trying to harm the woman, not help it.
Yeah, so that's also confusing. So I'm in the boat now. I'm at the Mayflower, and
Especially if we also know that 25 years before the persecution stopped and so on, it must have been at least from 538 to 1798.
yeah. So understanding that flood has to do with all the false teachings, the deceiving things, then I'm totally agreeing now. I learned something. Thank you.
Thanks, Lizanne. So we have something to do with teaching. It's a flood. It's water, sorry. And we're told it's a flood, which is just overwhelming teachings. So it's trying to deceive the people with its ideology, etc. That's how the dragon, the first beast of Revelation 13, behaves. So now we go on to that second beast, and we're told that the dragon is now going to open its mouth to do what? Speak. That second beast behaves like the first beast. We're told that in that second half. So at least if we take that logic, what does the speaking of the dragon mean or look like?
Teachings.
Okay. So we're at this point where now it's no longer a lamb and it's a dragon. And there's something ideological that's happening with regards to the glorious land. And so the question is that a point in time or is that describing a history? Ellen White will say
History.
Point in time.
Yeah, common.
will say it's a point in time where a law is passed.
Mm-hmm.
But if the behavior of the lamb was a period and we juxtapose the two, then the dragon speaking has to be
a period.
Yeah.
a period as well. So throughout this period, it's speaking like a dragon. It's behaving like a dragon. Matthew tells us that what comes out your mouth is an indication of what type of being you are. So it's not just speaking like a dragon and being something else. It's because it is a dragon. It's behaving like a dragon. This lamb behaved like a lamb, so this dragon is going to behave like a dragon. This act of deception. And going through the verses, that's what we read. In verse 14, Revelation 13, verse 14, it talks about this dragon is going to deceive everyone. Just like what we read in chapter 12, where Lausanne wanted to take us. We can see the parallel now.
Could you also
So
then say because the dragon was speaking, or there was this flood during this 1260, that it also has to be a time period now, or is that wrong to say?
So we don't have the words, but we've got this indication from verse 14 that talks about this dragon wanting to deceive everyone. And how's it going to deceive everyone? By speaking through its words, and tells us that it speaks like a dragon. It speaks like that dragon that we read about in chapter 12 to deceive everyone through its teachings, through what it's going to say. Yeah? So there's two things that we got from that. One is, what does speaking mean? We'll say a message, giving a message. And the time of that is a period where it's going to give this message from the Sunday law up until whenever that ends. So we've got two things. So the original question was, as a group, I think you said, what does the speaking mean and when does it happen? Does that answer your question? Not in application, but just conceptually.
Yes. So it does, because I think we were always so focused on what Ellen White wrote about the speaking is this law, is at that point of time, but now you showed actually it's more, it's a period of time, so it's more the ideology behind it, the message that it's shared. It's not a point where we say, because they did this, or they said this, or whatever, that's this speaking.
This lamb that we have here, what's it doing throughout this time period?
It's trying.
So when it's being a lamb, what's it doing? What makes it a lamb? I think Arian gave some indication of that last week.
In application, you mean?
Yeah, in application.
Protecting God's people.
Speaking loud.
Okay, yeah, so it's protect, but how is it protecting them?
The human rights.
So it's to do with human rights, sure, but how?
Protecting it from the old world.
Like literally, what's it doing to protect people?
Make the constitution.
So, well, that's one of the first things it does. It has this constitution.
And it has a government that's not like these kings in Europe.
So this lamb, this kingdom, Mark said it sets up a specific government. Lizanne, you wanted to say something?
Well, it keeps, how do you say that in English? It makes the seventh kingdom not able to rise until
restrained.
it is.
So it's just doing its business. Let's just say it doesn't know that there's going to be a seventh kingdom. It just exists. Arian, how did you describe it last week?
You're referring to the filtering system that I was talking about?
No, just as a lamb. This is a kingdom that's been set up. How do you as a kingdom, protect your people? Do you just
To organize,
say stuff?
to organize yourself and have a
Okay.
system in place. Organization.
So sets up institutions through law to protect said people. So it's doing that throughout this whole time period, whether it's the Civil Rights Act, whether it's women's rights or minority rights, etc. So throughout this whole time period, that's what it's doing, or supposed to be doing, is protecting your people. And the best way to protect your people is to codify things, to set up institutions that do that. So it's not just it saying, we love human rights, it's actually codifying those human rights. So Ellen White is not off on, if I can say, off on one, when she says this dragon is going to pass laws. Because this lamb passed laws to protect people, and the best way to protect people is to codify things. So this dragon has to do the same thing. It's going to deceive you and tell you that these things, these actions that I'm going to do, this legislation that I'm going to pass, is there to protect you. It's a deception. So throughout this time period, it's going to behave organizationally. It's going to set up a system of government that's in its mind, or deceiving people into the fact that it's protecting people. So there is a connection to law. It's the one key takeaway for me is that one law that does that, or is it describing the behavior of a kingdom throughout a time period? Okay, so are we okay with that question?
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
So you're
Yeah,
about
go on.
an hour, but we had a little break in between. Just
Sure. So we can carry on a bit, and then you tell me when we've gone for, let's just say, 30 more minutes. How long was the break we had? Maybe 5 minutes?
Yeah. After the break,
So-
we're now 45 minutes after the break.
Just tell me when to stop.
Yep.
I can't. Okay. So we have a story about a dragon from what we call the Sunday Law up until whenever that dragon stops ruling, behaving in a way where it's setting up systems of government, deceiving people through a message to affect the people. I asked the question at the beginning, if we want to understand the Sunday Law period, where can we go? And the options that we got were Revelation 13, 14, Daniel 11, verse 41. But the key one that everyone's been going on about is in Revelation chapter
17. Yeah, sorry.
chapter 17. I want us to see the same concept in various places so that we can know that the concept is true about what we're talking about when we go to Revelation 17. So in Revelation 17, it gives a specific perspective of this relationship between an entity, what we call a woman in symbology, and kings. And then a point that Arjan's been stressing, or did stress in his presentation last week, was the collateral damage that happens to the people because of this relationship between the woman and the kings. In this story in chapter 17, we get details about what has happened and what is going to happen to this woman, but it starts off from the perspective of the fifth kingdom, that time period during the 1260. I'm sure that as a group, well, I hope that as a group, you've gone through understanding what that woman means and what that the kings mean. So if you have, I'll ask one by one. How would we define the woman? I'm not going to go through the steps now, because I think we've done that. But Walter, the woman. There's a definition that we've given to describe the woman. And that story in Revelation 17. Do you recall anything being taught about what that woman is?
Ideology.
So there's ideology, that's part of that. But is it just ideology? The woman is ideology that exists in a vacuum that just floats around these ideas? Or is there something more to it? Anyone can jump in.
Entity.
Emily's?
Yeah, I was about to say like an entity that can take up or hold that ideology. So that is usually political parties, political entities.
Okay. So without describing which entity, we know that it is an entity, and it has to be an entity that can make political decisions because of what we've just spoken about, of the necessity of politics in all of this to protect people. You can't protect people outside of politics. So this entity is specifically related to politics. We know that in some shape or form. It has to be able to shape politics. And the kings, without making application, Mark, what definition have you heard or come about?
An entity with power.
So there is power involved. So it has to have a specific type of power. Why does it have to have power?
Being corrected by Arjan.
Oh, no.
A political entity with power.
Okay.
Political institution. Wow, that was some time ago.
No, that's fine. Why are each of these, where do each of these things come from? Why political? Why an institution? Why does it have to have power?
I was the kings is like the state power. It has this structure, this how do you say? To govern a country, you need a lot of institutions and the whole infrastructure to coordinate your power, so to say. And I think that's described in this word, political entity, political institution with power. But it needs a form of ideology. So it needs this woman to swing on this whole radar system of
Okay, wait, you've said a lot. Let's break it down. So what I got from what you said about power is that it needs power to affect the people. You can't affect the people without power. Yeah?
Mhm.
And you said something about politics because it's through politics that you make policies that affect those people. A few years ago, 5 years ago now, when we talk about the formalization of the message that leads up to the Sunday law, internally, at least, Elder Tess stood up and she went on and on and on about what topic?
Feminism.
What about feminism?
Radical feminism.
And what's the key premise of that? What is radical feminism?
Equality.
Okay, so there's something to do with equality. So I'm going to just reword answers you give me to how I understand them. So it's about human rights. That's equality.
Mm-hmm.
But what about it specifically? Does radical feminism address?
Women's rights specifically.
Not whose rights,
Oh.
but how those rights are addressed. Because you can describe feminism, but she saw it fit to go a step further and say, let's not just talk about feminism, let's talk about radical feminism. And she pulls out a quote from history that says the personal is political. And what did that mean for us? What does that mean for you, for women? What did that mean at the time when this quote is taken out of history, when it was first broached?
You're the only woman.
That what happens behind the front door is also important for the whole system somehow.
I think I understood what you said, that there are these women that exist and they see their lives are not fair. The lives that they have, the lives that they live, there's something common that runs through each of their lives. Life's not fair. And so the reason that life is not fair can't be by chance. It can't be because of decisions that I make in my home as a woman. It can't be because of decisions that this one isolated man makes in my home. There's something bigger than all of us that's shaping our lives. And what is that?
Patriarchy.
Yes, patriarchy. But why does patriarchy persist? Because of politics.
Yeah.
It's because the system is set up that affects individuals' lives. So it's top down. So if you fix the system, you fix the individual lives. It's not bottom up.
Yeah.
That for me is a key takeaway from understanding what radical feminism is that the system is the one that shapes and molds personal lives. So going back, I ask these kings, we've defined it as political institutional power. Why do they have to be, or not why are they political? Given what we've just said.
Because they are
That's what state
chosen by the people.
Chosen by the people because they're the thing that shapes the lives of the people.
Mm-hmm.
It's politics that does that. Political because the personal is political. These people's lives are either protected or damaged because of politics. Okay, so we have the woman, we have the kings. For the woman to carry out her purposes, what does she need? She's this entity, she has ideas, she wants the people to adopt her ideas. What does she do?
She writes the kings.
She needs something with power.
Yeah.
And she goes to ride them.
Yeah.
To control them, to control these kings. Here's your woman, and no improvement has been made from a few weeks ago. If anything, my beast has gotten worse. And you have this beast that's going to be ridden because the woman wants to get the people to drink from a cup. She wants the people to take the ideology of the woman, so she goes to ride that woman. And as much as Revelation 17 is describing the history of the fifth kingdom, because we know that the seventh kingdom is a resurrected fifth kingdom, we can use the two together. We can use the fifth to understand the seventh.
Just to give you a heads up,
And-
we're getting close to.
Okay, so let's take a break actually, because this leads on to question 2,
Okay.
the story about Revelation 17. So I'll read the question. It is said that every kingdom starts good and ends bad. What about the sixth? Did it fail in its job function? No, it did fail in its job function, but did it end bad? So that's the question, which we'll pick up. And to answer that question, we need to understand correctly what this woman is, what these kings are. So for now, at least, do these definitions, not do they make sense in the words, but do you agree with them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll carry on after a break.
Okay.
How long?
Do you have what is it,
10 minutes.
10-minute break? 15-minute
Yeah.
break? Whatever you want. Yo.
Okay, let's close the word of prayer
Mhm.
for now. Dear God, thank you for the time that we've spent together. Thank you that we can go through these things slowly. I pray and ask that as we go through them, we may not make mistakes. Whatever may be stopping us as people from fully engaging now, whether it's fatigue, whether it's some ailment, whatever the case may be, I pray and ask that your hand may be there with us so that we can give your word the attention it deserves. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.